My story starts over 20 years ago, long before I learned about Vital Mind Reset. Some of my clearest memories as a teen are memories involving depression and feeling suicidal, something I hid from the people around me because even then I understood the stigma associated with it. I muddled through having periods of time where things were pretty good, and then having periods of time where life was really pretty much unbearable. By the time I was 19, I was referred to a psychiatrist, and shortly after had my first hospitalization. By the time the first few hospitalizations were over, I was on anti-anxiety meds, antidepressants, a mood stabilizer, a sleeping pill, an antipsychotic, and maybe other stuff I really don't remember anymore because it was a long time ago. These meds did a number on my body, at one point causing me to develop the signs of type 2 diabetes. I gained 130 pounds between the meds and the inability to get out of bed. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I'm really not sure what else, as I have a few years I have no memory of. And to keep things shorter, I'll just say that over the next 5 years, I spent just as much time in hospital as I did out of hospital. At times, I was on locked wards because I was a high risk of suicide, and so I was even under 30-day mandatory stays at a few points. My depression didn't respond to meds and mood stabilizers at first, so I ended up on federal and provincial disability because I was unable to work. Desperate for relief, I even tried electroconvulsive therapy, also known as ECT, a number of times. I think when all was said and done, I had somewhere around 31 different treatments of ECT, spread out over the course of years, but that's a lot of times to get your brain zapped. And it definitely does leave some damage to your body. I did get some short-term relief from the ECT treatments, but the quote-unquote minor and transient memory loss that I was promised turned out to be permanent memory loss. I have years worth of memories that simply don't exist in my brain. I forgot roads, I forgot movies, I forgot life events, and we aren't talking about a distant memory that just can't quite be recalled. We are talking about completely gone. The ECT essentially erased big chunks of my memories, and 17 years later, I haven't regained any of them. 17 years ago, I made the first decision that set me towards health. I decided that medication would never be the full solution to happiness, and so I made the decision to choose life. I chose to learn to live with my suffering and to make the best I could out of it. I made the decision to slowly wean off some of my medications that I knew weren't helping me. The sleeping pills were the first to go because I wasn't sleeping even with taking them. Over the next few years, I was able to come off of most of my meds except for an anti-anxiety med, a mood stabilizer, an ADHD med, and my thyroid meds. I started exercising and lost 30 pounds of weight. I started actively engaging in taking care of my body, and I was able to return to work part-time. Nothing really changed mood-wise with reducing my meds. I gained more energy and felt less drugged, but my mood still fluctuated. I still dealt with months where I had no energy and would just go through the motions of taking care of myself and my family, and then would literally retreat from the real world into a virtual world of online games and friends. I haven't had a suicidal episode since I made that decision to live my life, but I was still having depressive episodes. I had just learned how to hide them from the people in my life. This is what my life looked like a year ago. I have a loving and supportive husband and 3 great kids, but that inner happiness is something that has previously seemed like a false promise. On some levels, I believed that it didn't exist, and I marveled at how friends and family could go through life with so much energy. This past February, I accidentally stopped taking my ADHD med, but didn't realize it until I was 4 days past my last dose. I hadn't been sure of how much of a difference it was making anyways, so on the advice of my doctor, I decided to stay off of it and see what happened. The months that followed coming off of that med were some of the roughest months I've had in years. I went through periods where I literally couldn't think. I lost the ability to plan things out clearly, and my brain felt muddled. At one point, the withdrawal was so bad, I considered going back on it, but there was just one problem. My health had noticeably improved with coming off of the med, and so I felt like I would be trading one problem for another if I went back on it. The withdrawal stopped at one point for a few weeks, and then it came back with a vengeance in the form of depression and just a general difficulty with thinking and clearly planning things again. My doctor suggested a different med to try and manage the symptoms at this point, but we both agreed to wait a month and see if they resolved again. Thankfully, they did resolve enough, because the med I was being offered was in the same class of meds as one that had caused my high blood sugars and 60 pounds of weight gain. I would have declined that med, but I'm not sure how I would have coped if the symptoms hadn't decreased when they did. An interesting thing happened as the withdrawal effects lifted. I became aware of how the med had been essentially clouding everything. It was as if I had been seeing the world through a curtain, but hadn't realized it. Once the curtain was lifted, I realized that there were some changes I needed to make in my life. I set goals for myself in terms of how I wanted my life to be. I developed a vision of what I knew I was capable of, and was working on coming up with ideas that might let me figure out how to reach my goals. I still struggled with feeling like my brain wasn't working quite right, but I started looking for ways to push through it and fix it. I came across Vital Mind Reset by accident one day, but it caught my attention because the first information I read was talking about brain fog. For months, I had been feeling like my brain was broken. I felt like my thoughts and mind were there, but they were behind this muddled up wall of fuzzy cotton, and I just couldn't figure out how to get through it. I'd never heard the term brain fog before, but it was the perfect description of the exact problem I wanted to solve. I was also having regular blood sugar crashes despite not being diabetic, and sometimes they were quite problematic. I was skeptical about what I read, but signed up for the short video series and watched them as they came out. The great thing about the videos is that the suggestions were relatively easy to try, and it gave me a chance to see what potential a change in eating might have in my body. I gave up my normal sugar-loaded morning cereal, kind of miss it, it was good, and decided to try the KB smoothie. Amazingly, I found the normal morning blood sugar crash I usually had didn't happen that day. I should add here that at this point I had already been considering going gluten-free. About 6 months prior, I had had one of those moments of inner knowledge where I realized I was going to have to give up gluten. These moments of inner knowledge are powerful, but giving up gluten really scared me, and so I made excuses. I spent the full 6 months making excuses as to why I didn't really need to give up gluten, and was just exiting out of that excuse stage into true consideration at the point I came across the Vital Mind Reset program. And I kind of laugh now because now, I have no desire to go back on gluten because I feel so different without it. But giving it up was like a huge mental barrier that I had to cross. Enrolling in Vital Mind Reset was easily one of the biggest decisions I've made in recent years. For me, it wasn't a matter of wondering if it would work or if the science was truly there. It was more a matter of asking myself if I could do it. I knew that the changes I would need to make would be monumental, and that it would change my life regardless of the outcome. And to be very candid, I was concerned that I would find the program too difficult, or that my food cravings would get the better of me and I wouldn't be able to complete it. In the end, I decided that I was willing to change my diet for 30 days, just as an experiment. Worst case scenario, I'd have lost a month of eating favorite foods for no benefit. Best case scenario, I might gain a level of vitality that I fundamentally knew existed inside myself, but I just didn't know how to tap into it. I'm naturally skeptical about things, so I was cautious going into the program, but I was willing to apply myself to see if it worked. I knew the VMR program was going to be powerful for me when I did the very first survey. As I went through those 5 questions, I realized that I had given up on true happiness because I believed that I couldn't communicate how I was feeling without having more medication pushed on me, and I fundamentally knew that increased medication wasn't the right answer. This realization that I had unknowingly been less forthright with my care providers was a real wake-up call. Until this point, I hadn't really identified the full range of harm that traditional psychiatry had done to me, and as a result, I hadn't realized how much my communication was influenced by not just my belief that more meds weren't the answer, but also fear of being misinterpreted or mistreated. These fears may sound irrational, but when you've been on the inside of the system and experienced abuse at the hands of the professionals who are supposed to be helping you, it's a very real concern. I want to say that I really invested myself in VMR. I made the time to do each of the activities in the first weeks when so much of the course was focused on preparation and evaluation of old belief systems. I think that this prep work really helped set me up for success, but it also really helped put me in touch with myself on a different level. It encouraged me to listen to my inner voice, my inner healer, and these were timely and relevant reminders. The actual diet component isn't as scary as it sounds like. I realized just a few days in that my best recipe for success was to find my own recipes that were compliant with the program and plan my meals around whatever ingredient I wanted to use for supper. This took the stress out of meal planning for me and meant I didn't need to focus on grocery shopping quite as much. I had a regular psychiatrist appointment 9 days after the diet portion of the program had started. And at this point, I had felt some small amounts of improvement in terms of my brain fog clearing, but I wasn't really conscious of other changes just yet. During that appointment, I told my doctor about VMR, and I told him about what my goals were. Over the course of the conversation, I suddenly realized the date, and that this was the first year of my adult life that my mood was holding steady. And in fact, I was actually doing pretty good. I left the appointment and immediately messaged a friend to tell her what I just realized. And I was excited and truly hopeful. But more than that, my sleep quality had improved and my energy had increased. And this was, I guess, my aha moment, so to speak, of just how powerful the VMR program could be. By the time I finished out the 44 days, I'd been through a few major events, some of which would have previously left me needing to sleep for days to recover from, but they hadn't affected me that way. I had developed an awareness of how connected we all are to each other, and I feel more engaged in life. But perhaps more importantly, I feel joy. I no longer look at other people and wonder how they get so much done in a day or how they recharge after doing so much. I no longer believe that anyone with a busy life is secretly suffering and is somehow just stronger than me. I feel vital. I feel happy. I feel alive. And perhaps most importantly, I feel hope. Hope for the future, hope for my health, hope for my well-being. VMR has given me back my life. It has allowed me to achieve the goals that I had set for myself before I even heard of VMR. And it has created a light at the end of the tunnel for being able to hopefully one day get off of all of my meds. Still a ways away from that because it takes time, but I feel hopeful. I've felt for years now that my body is aging rapidly on the inside due to my meds, and I have wanted to get off of them so that I can live until I'm old and be able to enjoy grandkids and maybe even great-grandkids. I want to enjoy my life and be engaged with it and thriving in it, and I finally feel like that dream is a reality. I was right in my belief that VMR would fundamentally change my life. I just had no idea of how much it would change it for the better. And thank you so much to Kelly Brogan for having the bravery to share these ideas with people around the world. Thank you for doing the research that created a program that is set up for success. And perhaps most of all, thank you for creating a safe space to go through all of this self-discovery. My life has new potential thanks to VMR, and I feel truly grateful.